And at Jerusalem dwelt certain of the children of Judah and of the children of Benjamin. This is really interesting. Judah was the fourth child, and we got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Remember those three names, and you got half the Bible memorized. Jacob had 4 wives and 12 sons and 1 daughter, Dinah. Those 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel because his name got changed to Israel later, Jacob and Israel. Okay. Well, the fourth one was Judah. Now, Judah, interesting character. He was married, had 3 sons, and oldest son gets married. And the rule was in that culture, if you die before you have any children, your brother has to marry your widow, and the first child they have gets your inheritance. That's the way they kept the property all straight back then. So the oldest boy died. You can turn that AC back on there, would you, Anna? Oh, thank you, Blake. Oh. And so the second son married the girl and realized this is not going to be my child. And so you can read the whole story for yourself, and God killed him. And so she's waiting for the third child. And Judah, the third child, gets big enough to get married, and Judah doesn't give him to her. And so she goes and dresses up like a harlot and seduces her own father-in-law and has a child by him. So this is an illegitimate child. Now, if you read in Deuteronomy, one of the laws was a bastard child cannot come into the congregation for 10 generations. 10 generations, you can't come in. That's a long time to wait. So here you've got Pharez, who's an illegitimate child. Turn in your Bibles. I should have had these verses here. But if you've got your Bibles, go to the book of Ruth, chapter 4. Ruth is a beautiful love story, and at the end of the book of Ruth, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, no, before that. First, Second Chronicles, way before that. First and Second Samuel, here we go. Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Okay. Before all the first and seconds in the Old Testament. In the book of Ruth, it tells the beautiful story of Ruth the Moabitess. And by the way, the Moabites never should have been born. The whole nation shouldn't exist. That's from Lot and his daughter. Okay. Here's a whole nation of people that shouldn't even exist, the Moabites. And Ruth was a Moabite. And she said, I want to serve God. Okay, come on. You can't, don't blame if your parents did something wrong, go serve God. Don't blame them. Well, you can find something to do with God for your life. So at the end of the book of Ruth, I read this and I thought, what is this? At the end of the book of Ruth, chapter 4, look at verse number 17. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, talking about the baby Ruth had. There's a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He's the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now look at verse 18. Now these are the generations of Pharez. I thought, why would you start a genealogy with Pharez? Who on earth is he? Well, he's the illegitimate son of Judah. These are the generations of Pharez. Watch this. Pharez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz, the character in this story. Boaz begat Obed. Obed begat Jesse. Jesse begat who? David. David was the 10th generation from Judah's bastard child. So David was the first one eligible to come back into the congregation. 10 generations. Now the children of Israel decided they wanted a king. They said, we want a king and we want one right now. And they got one. Who was the first king that they got? King Saul. And he was a dud. Who was the second king they got?
King Solomon.
King David. Then King Solomon. If they had just been patient and waited, God was going to bring them King David. He's the 10th generation. But Judah is an interesting character. And also Benjamin. Benjamin, that's the tribe that Saul was from. That's the tribe that was so wicked, the rest of the Jews nearly wiped them out in the book of Judges. Killed all but 600 of them. So the Benjamites and Judah and Benjamin, these two tribes, we can spend a lifetime studying those two, but let's go on here. So of the children of Judah and of the children of Benjamin, children of Judah, it's a bunch of hard names, 400, threescore, and 8. And score means 20, so threescore would be 60. 468 of them moved back to live in town. Now these are the sons of Benjamin, 928. They're coming back. They only had 600 when they nearly got wiped out. And Sariah, was the ruler of the house of God, and their brethren did the work of the house. It takes a lot of work to run a ministry. People got to do things. It takes a lot of work to run a church. And their brethren, mighty men of valor, 128. And the sons of Asaph, the singers, were over the business of the house of God. God takes music and singing really seriously. Asaph wrote quite a few of the Psalms in the Bible. David wrote exactly half of them, is the best estimate of 150 Psalms. David wrote 75. But Asaph wrote a bunch of them. He was the chief singer. Okay. For it was the king's commandment that concerning them that a certain portion should be given for the singers. In other words, that's a full-time job. They get paid. Paid musicians. Some churches have that today. And I think if you can afford it, it's a wise move. Do for every day. And Pethaniah, what a name. Pethaniah, the son of his dad, of the children of Zerah, of the son of Judah, was at the king's hand. His job is to be right there beside the king. That's a cool job. Stay next to the king. Run errands. Hey, Pethaniah, go get me a glass of water. Okay, yes, sir. Whatever you need, king. Just to be next to the king. What a thought. You know, Jesus came into town, and Mary and Martha, the two sisters, he was going to stay at their house, and their brother Lazarus, that died and raised from the dead. And Mary sitting there at Jesus' feet, listening, and Martha's busy trying to cook supper. And she comes in and complains, well, would you tell my sister to get here and help me cook supper? And Jesus said, Martha, Martha. One of 6 people in the Bible called twice. See if you can find the other 5. Moses, Moses, Abraham, Abraham, Martha, Martha. There's 3 of them. He said, Martha, Martha, you are cumbered about many things. Mary has chosen the good part. Sit and listen to me. Can you imagine being worried about cooking supper for the guy who just fed 5,000 people with a bag lunch? I don't think you need to worry about cooking supper. He can handle it just fine.